Welcome today to Off the Shelf, Book Talk with Book Lovers. And I'm here with my co-host, Elizabeth Nelson, and we're here to talk about what we love, books. So what are you reading, Betsy?
Well, I just finished the 8th book in the Maggie Hope series, called The Prisoner in the Castle. It's a series written by Susan, I think it's Elia McNeil. And for those who aren't familiar, Maggie Hope is an American living in England during the Second World War. And she starts off as Mr. Churchill's secretary and then sort of evolves into a higher spy-ish like character. And so the current book with her, it has a real and then there were none feel to it, where she's on an island, it's a set group of people, and somebody starts killing them off. And so it's trying to figure out what it is, where, and then you have people trying to figure out where she is because her family doesn't know where she is. So it was a real page turner, and
Is it good?
It was very good. I mean, very quick read. Yeah, I read the majority of those Maggie Hope books. I found a bunch of them on the app for the library.
Oh, sure.
And I tore through a bunch of them, and then I've had to wait, I think, the year between the last 2 books.
Oh, pain.
But I mean, Maggie's just real. She's always trying to apply math to everything because math is a constant. You know, she's always like, you can use these equations to figure out what's happening. And so it's really interesting to see her kind of growing as a character throughout all of these books. And she has a great group of friends. She has her friend David, who works for Mr. Churchill. She has roommates that live at the house. One of them is a ballerina. She has another one that's a mom. And so it's just kind of this evolving cast of characters.
So should you read them in order?
Yes, yep. This series you will have to read in order because all of the books build.
Okay.
And then majority of them refer back.
Okay, so
they're all kind of intertwined. But I mean, they're really quick reads. Once you pick them up, you don't want to put them down because they just suck you right in.
Well, I know the first one, Mr. Churchill's secretary. If you saw the movie The Darkest Hour, did you see the movie,
Yes.
Betsy? Oh, you did?
Yeah.
Okay. The gal who plays the secretary in that, I immediately thought Lily James, right, plays the
Yes.
role.
Yep.
I thought, oh my goodness, that is Maggie Hope.
Yeah, she does. It's a great series. I was very happy that I stumbled across it, and there's got to be another one coming. I haven't seen anything.
Is this book 8?
This is book 8. Yes.
Okay.
Yep, and it just came out I think this summer, so it hasn't been out super long.
So in other words, it's going to be a while.
Probably.
Yeah.
Unfortunately.
I know, the pain of having to wait.
Pain. And I've actually been kind of trucking through a bunch of books because, as I'd mentioned to you before, I thought all of my books were due last Friday. And then, of course, as soon as I'd finished the majority of them and returned them, and then was going to go online to renew a couple, Alex brought me my checkout receipt that he had stolen and hidden for a week. And none of the books were actually due. So I was churning out books.
A week ahead.
Yes, I was a week ahead. None of them were due until the 12th. So another one I finished was the 3rd book in the Themis File series.
Okay.
This one is called Only Human. The series is by Sylvain Nouvelle, I believe is how you pronounce the last name. The first book being, I can't think of the name of it right now, but the series follows when this woman is very young, she falls down this hole and falls into a giant mechanical hand. And then, so she spends her life kind of, once she grows up, kind of trying to figure out what this is.
Okay.
And then she's approached by this mysterious man in black.
Of course.
Who, with his help and this other help, they find all the other pieces of this giant.
Is he scattered all over?
He's scattered all over the world. So this giant machine, like a robot, that they then start using. And the whole book is... It's not written in story form. It's written through either transcripts, so you have the characters that way, or it's written as journal entries or interview transcripts and that kind of piece. But they're very good. And it's a very different way to read a book because it kind of, to me, reminded me of reading a play.
Oh, sure.
So,
like a script.
Yeah, so you had to kind of use more of your imagination to imagine what was happening, because it wasn't like, Gerald walked across the room and picked up a cup of tea. You just hear, it's just the people talking, and then it's, well, what do you think you're doing? And then you have to figure out from there kind of what's
sure.
going on. But it was very good, very science fiction, and kind of evolved in the series kind of evolved in ways I didn't really see coming. So that was good, because you find it, and then it's everything that happens, because one country can't just have a giant robot that can destroy the world. So then you have to figure that piece out of it, and then it's, well, is something going to come back for this? And so I don't want to give too much away, but all of the books are very good. Again, very quick reads, and I really enjoyed them. I kind of want to go back and listen to the audiobooks of these, because I wonder if you would pick up more from it from an audiobook way than just reading it.
More
since
like
that's how
watching
it's
a
written.
play?
Yeah, maybe more that way. So I'm kind of interested to go back and try that.
Okay.
What have you been reading?
Well, I am steeped in the Oxford Tea Room Mysteries. There are 10 books in the series. It's by an Australian author named H.Y. Hannah. And she has very clever names for her books, such as A Scone to Die For. Another one, Bites the Crust. Till Death Do Us Part. And the woman, the protagonist's name is Gemma. And Gemma was a high-flying executive in Australia and decided to chuck it all and return home to Oxford and open a tea room, a traditional tea room. And so when she was a student at Oxford, she was madly in love with this guy named Devlin, but she ended up breaking up with Devlin because he wasn't good enough for her mother. And so now, 8 years, fast forward, Gemma comes back. Devlin happens to be a police detective, homicide detective. And so they hook up again, and her best friend Cassie works at the tea room, and these books are all, one after the other. And then there's 4 older women who are in their 80s who they call the old biddies, and they're always sneaking around and investigating. And then there's a cat named Mucilai who's sort of the star, who's always getting into things and ends up kind of solving the mysteries. So those are good. And she also has another series called Bewitched by Chocolate. Now that's a tough one to read, because they're always making chocolates. It makes you want to go eat chocolate. But her titles are good too, like Dark Witch and Creamy. Witch Chocolate Fudge. So those are good too, and they all take place in the Cotswolds of England, and so it's beautiful scenery, and it's a high tourist area, so there's lots of people coming and going. And
That kind of reminds me of a series. There's one by, I think it's Joanne Fuchs.
Yes.
The first one is The Chocolate Chip Cookie Murders.
Yes,
And
yes.
those are all set in Minnesota.
Right.
But all of the books are a different type of dessert.
Makes you hungry.
And she runs a cookie shop, a bakery where she makes cookies. So she's always eating cookies, and it was like, oh gosh, I picked a really bad time to start a diet when I'm reading these books.
That's how these are, boy.
Cookies.
The tea room, they're having sticky toffee pudding, and they're having buttery scones, and Dora the cook, there's buttery scents wafting out of the kitchen, and all this great stuff. So they're fun to read. I'm on book 6. And so I'm thinking by the time I'm done, maybe there'll be book 11 out. And so I can keep up. But they're actually really kind of fun. They're cozies. They're not hard to read. You can almost knock off one a day if you've got the time.
Feel-good books are fun sometimes, just to read those. Another one I just finished is called I'm Proud of You, My Friendship with Fred Rogers. That's by Tim Madigan. And so he wrote kind of a memoir about, he was going through a really dark kind of time in his life. He was very depressed. His marriage was falling apart. And he wrote this book about how he was picked to go and interview Fred Rogers from Mr. Rogers' Neighborhood, and for his paper, and this interview turned into a friendship that spanned the rest of the time Fred was alive. And it's just, at one point he writes a letter to Fred, and he says, growing up, I never had a father, and my father never told me he was proud of me, and I've never had anybody tell me that. He says, will you be proud of me? You know, I just need that from somebody. And Fred writes back, you know, yes, 1,000 times yes. I'm very proud of you for everything you've done, and I will always be proud of you. And so then over all of these letters that they send, every single letter, email, phone call that they have, Fred always ends it with, I'm proud of you. And so it's just, you know, he really, I mean, everybody loves Mr. Rogers. The big thing right now with, you know, the documentary that just came out, and then there's going to be the movie with Tom Hanks. And then there's also a autobiography, or not an autobiography, a biography that has come out about him as well, called The Good Neighbor, that I haven't read yet.
So
but
what is it about Mr. Rogers that everyone loves so much?
Well, I think it's just that, you know, he's very calming. You know, you feel kind of like he's talking directly to you, and you feel like, you know, I think at the end of every show he says, you know, you make every day special by just your being you. Mm-hmm. You know, and he just kind of, you know, it's generations that have grown up with him and, you know, have learned from him. And I think it's just, he, as he was on TV is how he was in real life.
Okay.
And I mean, you know, just calling and checking on people. And like, there's a part where they say, you know, he went swimming every morning.
Mr. Rogers?
Yes, Mr. Rogers went swimming every morning for his exercise. And before he would go in the pool, he would weigh himself. And he said that every day for, I don't know how many years he'd weighed himself. He always weighed 143 pounds. And he said 143 was very important because there's one letter in I, there's 4 letters in love, and there's 3 letters in you. So his weight spelled out, I love you.
That's very clever.
Yes. So, but I mean, I think...
Was he a minister?
Yes,
training?
He was an ordained minister. Yep. But it was just a very... my husband is actually reading the book, and he's like, you can't take this back until I finish it.
And Tom's not a super reader.
No, he wants to read more, but I mean, you know, you just kind of, you can't help but like Mr. Rogers.
Well, and I know Alex, your son, loves Mr. Rogers, so I was curious what it is about Mr. Rogers that he likes so much.
I don't know. I mean, Mr. Rogers, from when he walks in singing Won't You Be My Neighbor, he's waving at him at the TV, hi, 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 and then he leaves, bye-bye. And he says choo-choo when he sees the trolley going through, and he knows all the songs. Like, if they're doing something on TV that involves motions, he'll do the movements along with it. I think it's a real generational thing. I think everybody, even like, I don't mind watching Mr. Rogers. I find him very kind of relaxing to listen to. You know, he kind of embraces the quiet. Like, when he's working on something, there's not a lot of like background music, or he's not, you know, constantly talking while he's doing something. He'll take that moment of just quiet and won't like have to have it filled with something. He'll just let the quiet sit. It is. And you kind of feel like he's talking directly to you.
Okay.
But
well, I have never seen a Mr. Rogers episode.
Well, come over and hang out with Alex. You'll see it all.
I might do that. So what else? One of my friend Connie Lambert recommended a book.
Oh, yeah?
The author is Amy Stewart.
Okay.
I got an email from Connie one day saying, have you read anything by Amy Stewart? And I hadn't. But she's reading The Girl Waits with Gun. And it's the first in the Kopp Sisters series. There's 4, and they take place from 1914. I think the last one's 1916.
Okay.
Kind of beginning into World War I. But one of the sisters ends up being a deputy sheriff, which is a really unique
during that time.
Job for a woman. And so Connie said the book's good, and so I'm going to check into that one.
Yeah.
Because I thought it'd be kind of fun. Another one I read is A Murder on the Iditarod Trail by Sue Henry.
Okay.
She's an award-winning Alaska writer, and she's written 13 books with Jesse Arnold and State Trooper Alex Jensen. And the first one, the one I read, Jesse's competing in the Iditarod, the great trail race, and the mushers are getting killed in different ways, and it's actually pretty good. And Alex Jensen meets Jesse for the first time, so they hook up in that book.
Okay.
And stuff. And then she's also written a second mystery series called Maxie and Stretch about a woman and her miniature dachshund. So you may want to read that one since you're a Doxy lover.
Yeah. That's true.
So do you have a list of books you want to read?
I do. I have a couple that I'm working on right now. I'm currently reading this one, which is why it's here, because it was in my purse and I wanted to put it out. So I'm reading The Mysterious Affair at Styles, which is Agatha Christie, and it is the first, I'm going to butcher his name, Hercule Poirot.
It's a great
the very
book.
first one by him, and I actually think this might be her first book that she wrote. And so that's been really interesting to kind of go back and read just a classic whodunit.
It's a
locked
great
room
book.
mystery.
It's a great book.
Yep. And then there's another through the app Libby that you can get through the library. They always have what's called the library big read. I think is what it is. And so it's a book that's available to anybody that has the app, so you don't have to like put it on hold.
Oh, okay.
And then there are forums that you can go and talk about it on to people. So it's kind of like a huge book club for anybody who wants to be in it. And their current book for that is The Girl with the Red Balloon by Catherine Locke. And I just kind of getting into the start of it, but from the synopsis, it's this girl is on a school trip to Germany and finds herself, she's traveled back in time and is hooked up with the resistance.
Oh my.
So it's everything that happens with that, and that somebody is trying to change the past. So then she has to try to help fix everything. And it actually looks like it's part of a series. So
Surprise!
Surprise! Yes, new series to read. I don't have enough of them I'm trying to finish right now. But it's always good to have more books to read. You can never have enough
isn't
books.
that terrific?
What are you reading right now?
Well, this is a list of 3 that I want to get. I'm on hold on all 3. One is the library book by Susan Orlean.
Okay.
She uses the unsolved mystery of the 1986 Los Angeles Public Library fire as a jumping off point and weaves the histories of libraries with their own memories and interviews of librarians.
Oh, cool.
I thought that sounded really good. And then another one I'm on hold for is The Dinosaur Artist, Obsession, Betrayal, and the Quest for Earth's Ultimate Trophy by Paige Williams. She's a New Yorker staff writer who writes about a Florida fossil hunter who was prosecuted by the federal government in 2012 for auctioning off a dinosaur skeleton. So I think that sounds kind of good. And then for fans of Robert Galbraith, who's actually J.K. Rowling's, she has a new one coming out, Lethal White. This is the 4th mystery featuring P.I. Cormoran Strike and his assistant Robin Ellicourt. And this case takes them from the back streets of London to a sinister manor house in the country. But Lethal White says to me probably heroin or drugs or something. And I'm not always keen on those books, so I'll have to find out if it's drugs. I might have to pass by.
Yeah.
But so, what else are you reading?
I'm going to read that White Tombs that we talked about, the author that came and visited. I've got that one on my stack. It's a small stack now, which is nice. I've sort of caught up a little bit. And then I did, as I mentioned earlier, I do have that the Mr. Rogers biography.
Oh, right. If you can get it away from
The Good
Tom.
Neighbor. Well, no, he's got the I'm Proud of You.
Oh, okay.
We have too many Mr. Rogers books in our house right now to keep track of. And then another one that I have at home for the library is called Other People's Love Letters, 150 Letters You Were Never Meant to See by Bill Shapiro. And it's a guy who, he was going on a date with a woman, and while she was getting ready, he found this old love letter that she'd received. And so it kind of piqued his interest into people's past love letters that they had hung on to. And so he did a big thing where he collected people's stories, and this is kind of a compilation, I can say the word today, of the letters he received. And so they're like love letters, breakup letters, and at the back of the book, it looks like it actually will tell you more about some of the history from the letters, what actually happened to those people.
Oh, that's kind of
So I think that'll be kind of interesting. That kind of plays into like my history love, so.
Oh, yeah.
So I think that'll be fun to read. And I mean, I've got a to-be read list that's on Goodreads app that's longer than my arm. So I just have to get on and start ordering more books from the library.
Well, another series that, well, it isn't really a series. It's a character that appears in 4 books, and these are old books. They're by Ellery Queen, which is actually 2 men who wrote under the name. But it's The Tragedy of X, The Tragedy of Y, The Tragedy of Z, and Drury Lane's Last Case. And the protagonist is a fellow named Drury Lane, and he was born in a theater. His mother was an actress,
Okay.
and his name is Drury Lane based on the lane he was born on. And he's now a retired Shakespearean actor who lives in a lavish castle on the Hudson River in upstate New York. And he's deaf, so he
Okay.
reads lips. And so he's able to read all the things in the newspapers and solve crimes. And so he retired from the stage, and he solves this crime. And now the police commissioner in New York comes, and the captain of the homicide squad comes, and they meet with him, and he starts working with them on different things. And
Yeah.
they're really good, but they're old. They're probably from the 30s, maybe.
Yeah, I have a hard time because I have so many books that I want to read, but I also have, I have a few that I want to go back and reread, but I have a hard time allowing myself to reread books when it's but you have all these that you haven't read. It's yeah, but I really liked that one and I want to read it again. So it's kind of an inner struggle where it's
When I was talking to Jeremy about the Dresden books, it made me think I should go back and reread those. They were really good. And so I might do that because Fool's Moon, I think, is the first one, and that's about werewolves
okay, yeah.
and stuff, and that's a pretty good one. And so we were talking about that, and I think, because I don't know when his new one's coming out.
Yeah. That
and
can
stuff.
that can be hard when you're waiting on a book and you don't know when it's coming.
No, and yeah, and when Jeremy and I were talking about it, we were like, oh, it might be a while because he's doing a lot of stuff these days.
Well, and there are some books that I have on the shelf that I'm looking forward to when Alex is older, being able to introduce him to those and read them. I have my very well-thumbed, well-loved Harry Potter books, and then I think Black Friday when we were out one year, I bought a new set of all of them.
Oh.
So I have a set of of all 7 books that I haven't used that are sitting there so that someday when he is old enough to enjoy them, we can start reading those. And actually I could probably start reading that to him right now and he'd just listen and keep doing what he was doing because he loves books.
You know, the thing that's so amazing about that Harry Potter series is I remember your mom had to buy a book for you and a book for Rebecca, your sister, because you would fight. You couldn't have one book between you.
Yep.
And
we
I
both had to
remember
read it at the same time.
going to your house and you in one chair and Rebecca in the other, and you're nose deep in this book of 800 pages.
Yeah.
I mean, what a phenomenal thing to do. I mean, millions of kids.
Yeah. Well, and then there was I know at the Litchfield Library, they just had a Harry Potter party because I believe it's the 20th anniversary.
Yes, they did.
Since
One
all the
in
books.
Hutch, too.
Yeah, I think a lot of places were doing them, but it's been 20 years.
I can't even believe that because it just seems like yesterday that I still love the first book the best.
Yeah. Well, I love them all. I mean, it's, as I mentioned before when we talked about this, they're characters I grew up with. So you felt like by the time you finished the 7th book, they were your friends. They were your family. You knew them inside and out.
Well, and they were your age
Yeah.
because they sort of aged with
Yes.
you.
Yeah, I know, and that's the one thing that's been kind of fun with a redheaded 2-year-old at home. It's well, I'm going to dress him up as a Weasley one Halloween. He's not going to have any say in it. He's just going to be a Weasley.
Pretty good idea with the red hair. That's a
Yeah.
great idea. But I do think that J.K. Rowling was so brilliant to be able to create an entire world.
Yeah, and especially a world that has, is spinning off now because now you have Fantastical Beasts. You have the first movie, and there's a second movie coming out for that, and then you'll have, you have the stage show, and I'm sure there'll be many more.
I still
things
think
to
she'll
enjoy.
come out with another Harry Potter at some day.
Please. That'd be great.
Well,
But-
it's such an amazing series, especially when you look back and you see how it got kids to read. I mean, what an amazing, amazing thing.
Yeah. I think anything that's going to help kids read is important. I think anything that'll want you to pick up a book is a good thing to get into reading. But
You know, speaking of which, the Hutchinson Public Library is doing a fantastic job of monthly children's programming. And they just had Jim Best here on Monday, who wrote the I Rate Parrot
okay.
book. And he did a reading, and last I heard it was well attended and people enjoyed it. They have a Master Gardener one coming up sometime in October. and I don't know the date, but I can get the date.
Yep, and we can post it on our Facebook
Yes.
page. We'll post it on Instagram and Twitter. If you have any questions about any of the books that we've talked about, or if you have a book that really impacted how much you love to read or that you want to share with us, you can always send us an email at offtheshelfbooktalk@gmail.com. We'd love to hear from you, and we'll see you next time.